And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. We got on this Wednesday a loaded pod for you. So much to break down here. Shane Steichen, after getting sick last week at the Combine, did follow through on his promise to meet with the media. He met with the media on Tuesday. And George, I can't believe we'll get into here in a second. He actually gave an opinion or gave a thought and didn't just deflect a question. We'll tell you what he said, because this has potentially some massive impacts on what the Colts do at 15. We'll tell you what Shane Steichen did say there. George was in Indy, boots on the ground at the Combine. We'll discuss a few players that popped and how that does impact the Colts thinking when it does come to pick 15. Rumors about maybe the Colts making a big-time splash in free agency. We'll give the details and the likelihood that this rumor does come to fruition. The Colts do land a big-time name here in free agency. But of course, George, we got to start with the biggest news here on this Wednesday. Franchise tag deadline was Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern. I will say we've not gotten off to a good start here for 2024 predictions, because I predicted by this time Michael Pittman Jr. will have a long-term extension. And right now, 0 for 1, franchise tag slapped on MPJ. Are you surprised, George, that a deal was not done by the tag deadline?
No, I never thought Pittman's going to do anything early. I mean, we talked about this way back, I think before the season last year, that I thought he's going to be a guy that is going to let the market dictate a lot of this, because he's been around the league. He understands how it works. He's not going to panic. He absolutely trusts his own ability and in himself. But I know that there were productive talks between him and the team. Let's put it that way. And I think it's going to happen before the season starts, before that July deadline, when it really kicks in. There's momentum on both sides, and that's always helpful. But I think too, part of this is kind of if you're Pittman, I think it makes some sense to wait and see if some of these other guys sign, see if that number goes up a little bit more. I mean, you've already got $26 million a year for Mike Evans. There's a few more guys who are probably going to do deals here. Not to mention the market itself. When free agency opens next week, it's a risk, it's a gamble, because it could go both ways. The number could be lower, when everything's said and done, if it doesn't pan out. But I think the Evans move alone should give you enough confidence to feel like probably going to come out on the better end of this if you're Michael Pittman. And from the team standpoint, I think Ballard just doesn't rush anything. I mean, I've not seen him panic, when it comes to any kind of personnel move. So he knew that he had the franchise tag in his back pocket. He talked about it several times this offseason. It wasn't plan A. It wasn't something that they were,
Right.
aiming for. But I think knowing that, and knowing that the odds of somebody now coming in and signing Pittman to an offer sheet when there's so many other receivers out, not just on the market, but in the draft, aren't great. And even if they do, you can match it. And if you don't, you get 2 first-round picks. So it's not a bad situation for Ballard to be in at all. He has said already that he expects Pittman to be here in September. I don't see why that would change. And I do think I'm not surprised it played out this way. I think the long-term deal is coming. It's probably just a couple months away still.
And number one, there's no shot any team is offering Pittman a contract and then giving up 2 first-round picks. There's no chance of that happening. And honestly, I think Chris Ballard would. That's tough to turn down 2 first-round picks if someone comes knocking to give Michael Pittman Jr. a big-time deal here that's out of your price range. So I'm with you. He'll be there week 1. I was hoping a deal was going to get done, because Pittman is the guy that you're going to spend the most money on for one player, right, this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like it's almost like, in a way, a domino effect of just like, okay, Pittman's contract is done. Here's how much money we have left over. And now let's see, again, not that he's a big-time free agent guy, but with all the free agents you have on your team, now you can start budgeting and saying, okay, how much can we give Grover Stewart? How much can we give Kenny Moore, Julian Blackman, and start to kind of go through there. Once you know the biggest contract is in the books with Michael Pittman Jr., that's what I was hoping and believing that a contract would get done by the franchise tag deadline. I would say it still should get done sooner rather than later. Again, I have no doubt in my mind that we will have, by week 1 at least, Michael Pittman Jr. locked up to a long-term deal. I'd be stunned, absolutely floored if he's playing on the franchise tag this season. So I'm with you. I think a deal will get done. I hope at this point, again, it is still sooner rather than later, just because that is the big ticket item that Ballard's going to pay the most money for. And I feel like that's just a good way to get the momentum rolling for this offseason versus kind of paying all the other guys first and still not being sure. I'm sure they have an idea, right? I'm sure there's a ballpark of what Pitt's going to get. So I'm sure that's mapped out. But still, Joe, I feel like it just helps kind of once you get that secure, now you can move your focus to everybody else on the team. You were able to at least secure Pittman for 2024, but there's still obviously work to do in getting him signed long-term, which is your goal. So that's, for me at least, why I still thought that we would get a deal done by this deadline. Clearly not, but we're both in agreement. Week 1, he's under contract long-term, and it's not a thought.
And I think it works both ways. I mean, I definitely think it's preferable to have the number on the books and then you can just move forward with it. But you can also, because of what you're saying, take that ballpark number. I'm sure they've got some idea of where it's at, and work with that. And then when you get the rest of free agency done, the other guys are brought back and the outside guys are taken care of. You can move the numbers around and Pittman's contract and kind of make them fit. So it kind of goes both ways. But I do think for me, I'm with you. I would, my preference would be to, that's just how I am with my own finances. I would rather know, okay, this big thing is locked in and we can move forward like that. But I do think now, if you're the Colts, probably the idea is, all right, let's just say 25 million. That may not be the number, but you're working with that as you're doing everything else. And then you can make that number fit because you know how it is. You can do all sorts of things. This year's front loaded, that year's back loaded. You can make it work once everything else is taken care of.
I think the guy here to watch, because honestly, I didn't really think about it too much, but you are right, because there are a lot of big name receivers that are up for extensions. I think the guy to watch the closest is T. Higgins, because Justin Jefferson's going to get paid by the Vikings. He's going to get in excess of $30 million. That's like Michael Pittman Jr. is not in that category. So he's not trying to reset the market. So he's not waiting for Justin Jefferson to get his deal so he can top his. That's not happening. CeeDee Lamb is another receiver that if he gets extended this year by the Cowboys, he's in that Justin Jefferson range, $29, $30, $31 million a year. That's not the Pittman range. T. Higgins, I think, is a guy to watch because that's a guy that the Bengals tagged. Seems like by all reports with the intention to trade. So if you're trading for T. Higgins, if you're another team, you're obviously going to give him a contract. And they do match, I would say, well in terms of skill set, in terms of production. Obviously, Higgins never got to be that number one guy because of Jamar Chase being there in Cincinnati. But the production to me is similar enough, and the role that both of them will take on, whether it's Pittman here at the Colts and Higgins on his new team, he's going to be the number one guy. That to me feels like a guy to watch in terms of if Pittman's going to try to maybe wait for someone else to kind of get a deal done and set the market for him. I think that's the guy he's waiting for. He wants to see where Higgins gets traded to and what that contract is going to be. I'm going to assume, George, if you want to put a timeline on that, I mean, we do see now a lot of big trades go down around the draft. I would probably assume that it's safe to say that we'll see a trade go down around the draft. Maybe it's a trade and a contract extension at the same time, kind of like the Eagles do with A.J. Brown. But that to me kind of feels like if you're right, and let's say Pittman is, and it has every right, like it doesn't really make much sense for him, to be honest, to rush things. He's not going to lose any money. In that case, with the salary cap going up and salary still on the up and up. But that feels like to me, like if he's waiting for one guy to kind of see how his market's going to be, I feel like that guy this offseason is T. Higgins. What do you think about that?
That's definitely the comp, but I think even the top guys, they affect everybody else because once the top of the market goes up, the middle, goes up too. So I think if you're Pitt, you're thinking, well, if it's 23 right now, maybe those two push it to 25. I'm not getting to 31, but I might go up from wherever I'm at now. And I think that's what, to me, it's a game that's well worth playing on his part. And it's something that I'll just say this much. There doesn't seem any panic around the team. I mean, Ballard didn't seem at all nervous at the combine about this, obviously, when he said that he expects him to be here in September. And I don't think that Pittman necessarily is trying to get out. If he was, I think you'd hear some noise already, from the tag. So I think both sides are just kind of waiting and trying, doing what they do. Pittman's trying to get the best deal he can get, which is what any player should do in his situation. And I think the team is using a tool they have to make sure that he's basically a restricted free agent instead of an unrestricted free agent, and your odds of keeping him go significantly up that way.
You're right. You're right. And he seems like, I mean, he's talked about it too in the, during the season and more after the season, not opposed to, he's not one of those guys that's going to rattle the cage and be, you know, upset that he's tagged. I think he realizes, like you said, the tag is more there because there is a mutual interest in bringing him back. And this is just a way to buy, 4 more months now until
Yeah.
July comes, 5 more months to make sure that those deals are, in place and that he's locked up long term. Let's put in one last deadline here because the exact deadline is what? I think July 15th, roughly, right around there.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
For an extension to get done before that's
like right before
not allowed.
camp, a couple
Right.
weeks before training camp.
Night 1 of the draft, which is April 28th. So let's just say 6 weeks away, is by the time the Colts are on the clock at pick 15, assuming they don't trade out. Is Michael Pittman Jr. by that point, do you think, locked up to a long-term deal?
It's possible, because I could see it being something by then. Free agency's done, and a lot of these numbers are going to be in. I'll say 70% that it's done then. Only because the Colts love to take these things all the way to the deadline. So like I could totally see it happening the last day it can happen, just because I don't know. It seems like that the Colts just love to do that. I don't know if they're all about the drama or what, but the tag happened 2 hours before the deadline. So this deal could definitely be the same way. It could be 2 p.m. July 15th. But I think most of what I think that they're waiting on both sides should probably be taken care of by the draft. So I think there's a better chance than not. I'll go at 70% that a deal's done by draft day.
I will say yes. If it's like a yes or no answer, I will go yes. He is signed long term, and that extension is done. And now we are focusing on the draft and pick 15. Which, speaking of which, George, very interesting that kind of like a natural segue into it, because Shane Steichen met with the media on Tuesday after having a sick day last week at the combine. And this has to be a record. I think for the first time ever, George, and now just over a year of press conferences with the indie media, I think he actually gave an answer to a question.
I'll tell you what, we've come to kind of joke about him a lot because he doesn't have a lot to say, and especially in season, he really doesn't want to give much away. I'll go ahead and say that was probably his best presser since he was here, top to bottom. I mean, he absolutely gave some answers, but he just seemed more comfortable, and I think a lot of that is it's year 2. He's not dealing with, last year you talked to him this time. He's trying to keep the state secret about Anthony Richardson, trying not to slip anything out there. Also, had just hired coaches. I think some of them maybe were still in the process of being finalized, trying to watch tape on the guys that you have, trying to set up play. It was chaos. This year, not so much. So maybe what we're seeing is a sign that off-season Steichen is going to be a little more open than in-season Steichen.
So to reference what we were talking about, Shane was asked during his press conference yesterday, again, Tuesday. Sorry for those that are listening whenever you are. Tuesday. He was asked the question, you've had bell cow tight ends in the past with the Chargers and with the Eagles. Is having a bell cow tight end important in your offense? He started the answer, George, as a normal Shane Steichen answer. Well, it's not that important. I like the guys we have here. Rattles off every single name in the tight end room. It talks about, he likes what they have. And then out of nowhere, did a 180 and said, but yes, it's definitely I definitely want to have a bell cow tight end. George, I rewound that 10-second clip 3 times. I'm like, did he just answer the question? He actually just gave a definitive opinion on what he wants in saying that in his offense, having a bell cow tight end is important. I could not believe it. I texted you to confirm because you were on the call. I'm like, am I hearing things? But no, he said it. And now I think that opens a door for Brock Bowers at 15. I think you got to connect the dots there, because unless you tell me if I'm wrong, George. Is there a bell cow tight end on this roster?
No, no. And he said that. Then the first part of the question was, I like the guys we have, but they're not bell cow tight ends. And obviously the wild card in all this is Johnny, because he didn't play last year. We've not seen, literally have not seen him in this scheme. A couple practices and training camp is it. He didn't do anything in the spring. It was a real brief period there in training camp before he got re-injured. And then he was shut down for the year. So, he's a wild card in that regard. And Shane can't bank on him and won't, because nobody on that coaching staff has really had any experience with him. They may like the potential, they may like the tape they saw from his rookie year, but that's not a bell cow, not at this point. And it's surprising to me that Shane answered the question. That part is shocking. He did say it is a necessity at one point, and I thought it was funny because he was kind of, like you said, he was hedging it, and then he's just like, you know what, it is a necessity. But I'm not shocked that Bowers is somebody he's going to be interested in because of that history. I mean, you look back, he goes far back enough with the Chargers. He was there when Antonio Gates was there. He's been with uh
Dallas
you know
Goedert with Philly
Dallas
most
Goddard
recently.
and Philly. Just every time he's had an offense, really, there's been that bell cow tight end that's been a part of it. And last year, if you were going to look at Shane's offenses, that he's been a part of his coaching career, the one missing piece, the one that really stood out last year was tight end. They didn't use the tight ends as much as he usually does. They didn't have that go-to guy. So I think Bowers is. I've always thought he was in play for the Colts at 15. I think the bigger question is, will he be there? I know the mocks right now are having him, slide all the way past. That I don't see. I mean, if I read a mock draft and Bowers is there at 15 and the Colts go somewhere else, I just sort of toss that one aside, because I think Brock Bowers' floor is 15.
I would agree. If he's there, I think the Colts absolutely take him. In that press conference too, kind of Shane was asked kind of like, looking back at the year, how has he worked with Chris? And he mentioned that him and Chris are on the same page a lot. And I think I give Ballard credit for last year's draft. I think he did draft a lot of guys in the eye of Shane. And he's done that even with Frank Reich as well. Paris Campbell was a popular Frank Reich pick that did not work out, but that was at least a pick he made because Frank Reich wanted him. So say what you want about Chris Ballard. He's been a guy that does draft guys that the coach wants and wants to use. So he does, it's not like, oh, these guys I like, and now you have to figure out how to use them. He does draft guys in the eye of how will this work in our offense with our head coach. So I think you hear that answer. Now, all of a sudden, you got to really think that Brock Bowers, if not already, is now at the top of the Colts board here. If you're Chris Ballard, a guy you keep an eye on here, a very short list. I'm with you if he's there. I don't really care who else is on the board. I think they are going tight end, in part because it's good to have versatility, but especially that position, if you can get one guy that does it all, I mean, you just totally unlock your offense. And two, you make it tougher for the defense because, like, if you just think about it last year, right? If Mo Ali Cox is on the field, odds are it's going to be more of a blocking kind of guy. So odds are it's going to be a run play. If Kylan Granson is on the field, odds are it's going to be a passing play. So in a way, you're almost giving away what you're doing based on just which tight end is on the field at what time. So now if you can get a guy in Brock Bowers that does it all, that stays on the field 80% of the time, you just make now your offense more deceptive and you keep the defense guessing. And that obviously makes Shane Steichen's offense even more unstoppable and harder to defend. So I'm with you. I don't think he gets past 15. The bigger question is he going to be there? I know a popular destination has been the Chargers at 5. I think they go, for me, more receiver than they do tight end. The Jets have been a team that I've seen, kind of talked about, but I think they need offensive line help in the worst way possible. I think there's a good chance, George, that the board does shake out, barring some crazy unforeseen circumstance, that we do see Bowers at 15. And if he's on the board by the time the Colts are picking, I'm with you. I don't think there's a chance that he's gone or that he's still on the board after the pick is made.
In addition to the position need, I mean, if you look at his skill set, it's a perfect fit for what Shane Steichen wants to do. I mean, everything you were just talking about in terms of being able to disguise what you want to do. Even Will Mallory last year when he was on the field, it was a pass. I mean, you knew that
Right.
he's a rookie. He's not going to go out there and start road grading people. So um, you can that's a huge element here that you can take care of. But a lot of Bowers is get in space, run after catch. He can, make the deep ball at times. He can get behind the defense. But I think when you really look at what he does best, it is that, finding that open spot, being the security blanket for the quarterback in that way, and a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson, but then making plays after the catch, which I think is something they really were lacking across the board last year. You bring him in and you put him in this offense, and it's a real easy fit. It's real easy to understand. The other part of what you were talking about, I think, is dead on. That I think is something that is going to be really interesting to watch this year. Ballard has always been very in lockstep with the coaching staff as far as how they do things. The fact that coaches are involved in the scouting meetings, they have a specific meeting where they bring them in so that the scouts know what to look for. They talk to the coaches and they say, this position, we want XYZ. And so scouts are looking for guys that fit that right away. And then once they get into this part of the process, the coaches will be involved and say, they're not making the final call, but obviously they can rule some guys out and say, no, you know what? I just don't think he's going to fit what I want to do. I would think year two is a big jump there, the same as it is for players. Because again, like we were just talking about, how much was on Shane and the rest of that staff's plate this time of year last year versus now they may be a little bit better. They can lock in a little bit more because they're probably a little bit more focused on the draft than they were a year ago. Not that they didn't care, but there were other things that needed to be taken care of. But also the scouts know a little bit better. They have a year of tape. They have a year with these guys. They know probably what the offensive and defensive systems, how they work a little bit better. So I think this could be a big year in terms of that, just to see, maybe a better idea of what drafts are going to look like moving forward as long as Ballard and Steichen are working together.
And two, I mean, you look at another thing that I like that Shane said on Tuesday was the fact that, he was asked this question in the eye of the receiver position about how deep it is. And he mentioned, it is important to get, that diamond in the rough, the guy in the third, fourth, fifth round that no one's really seeing right now that could really pop and explode. It's important to get that guy, but you can kind of expand that to any position. And like you said, you look at some of the best teams, they are the ones that truly take the sixth round pick and have them be a viable starter. I mean, a team that kind of jumps out to me that's done that, I think really well recently is the Los Angeles Rams. Look at this past year. They get Puka Nacua. The guy is a machine. And now all of a sudden, they hit on a few late round draft picks. And now all of a sudden, after a disastrous, 2022 season, and when they defended the Super Bowl ring and did nothing to defend it whatsoever, they bounced back in large part because they got those later round picks to hit. Obviously, pick 15, whoever it is, you want them to hit and hit big. But then as you get to the second, third, fourth, fifth round, that's where you really get that quality depth and can find guys that, like I said, are diamonds in the rough that if you're able to hit on those, it drastically impacts your team. We saw it a little bit, Jalen Jones did a good job here in year number one as a later round pick, contributing and playing well. And we'll see, he could be a week one starter for the Colts here in 2024. If that's the case, he continues to develop. That's a great find by Chris Ballard. If you can get a capable starting DB on day three, you're sitting pretty right there. So it is to, like you said, now that things have slowed down, you're not drinking from the fire hose. And obviously last year too, with the focus being primarily on quarterback, now with obviously that being taken care of, it's not just, who do you want at 15? But now, like I said, it's day three. How can we really dig in and find some of these guys that we think are great, but maybe no one else is giving them the credit they deserve? I think that to me is really now where you could see the kind of this draft hopefully hit and go further. One other thing, George, I thought was interesting from the Steichen press conference was the fact that he was asked about backup quarterback, what he wants. And he sounded like a guy that right now is on the fence between marrying the backup quarterback to the skill set the starter has, so getting someone that could play in a similar system to AR if he unfortunately does go down, versus having an experienced backup there that is there for more wisdom and can help kind of develop AR in year 2, even if the skill set does not match. For me, George, I would focus and I would prioritize veteran leadership over like scheme fit. I think you can get best of both worlds for someone or with someone like Tyrod Taylor. If the price range is right, and if he wants to kind of go to a place where he knows he's gonna not play, hopefully. But what do you think of that answer? Because we've talked about a little bit here. I know you mentioned it, but in a joking way, but sort of serious way, like Michael Penix Jr. is like your dream backup guy for the Colts if he does fall in the draft. What do you think about Shane's answer when he kind of talked about marrying, either the skill set as the backup or going with that veteran leader?
Yeah, I thought, he was kind of on the fence there. There's no question, because I think he was admitting that the Ravens way can work. That you've got Tyler Huntley back there, and he's obviously not Lamar Jackson, but he can do a lot of the same things. You don't have to change the offense completely when he's in there. But at the same time, I think he's thinking back to the fact that Gardner was able to come in and obviously run a different offense than Anthony was running, but keep the keep the machine rolling. They got close to a playoff spot, so ultimately it can work both ways. And I think Shane understands that. I thought was more telling what Chris Ballard said at the combine, which was that, from a backup standpoint, you need somebody the coaching staff trusts. It's got to be somebody they believe they can win with. Again, signs seem to point to Tyrod Taylor. I mean, you got a lot of guys. He's got a history with Shane. He's got a skill set that could help him run a similar offense to Anthony Richardson. He's obviously got the veteran leadership. Not saying it's going to be him, but he checks a lot of boxes as far as what this team should be and could be looking for. Now, the price is going to have a huge say in this. And, I think he's going to be 36. I think something like that. He's definitely getting up there. So, how do the Colts feel about that? And I think it's not the same wear and tear as maybe other guys, because he hasn't played a ton of football. He's played enough, but he hasn't played a ton of football. I think the most important thing is, look, you're losing a Pro Bowler in Gardner Minshew. So you got to go look and add a Pro Bowler in Tyrod Taylor. I mean, you got to replace like for like here.
Or Tyler Huntley. Can you make a
Tyler
trade?
Huntley.
First round pick for a Pro Bowl quarterback.
There are
Mitch
a
Trubisky.
ton of Pro Bowl quarterbacks on the market this year. This is not getting enough play.
There's another Pro Bowl quarterback out there, George, that is both a veteran and similar style as Anthony Richardson. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I'm afraid of who it might be.
Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson. George, your thoughts?
See, I thought you were going to say Carson Wentz.
Oh, God, no. No.
That's why I was afraid.
No.
I thought that's where you're going. Yeah, I don't think Russell's going to be a Colt. But you know what's interesting about Russell? Because I think he is going to he is going to sign league minimum somewhere.
Yeah.
So you've got every team theoretically in play. I mean, like, as much as I just said, no, it can't be a Colt. I mean, they can sign him for league minimum. If he wants to take the role, it can happen. So, but I wonder how that affects the rest of the quarterback market. I mean, if you're a team thinking about trading for Justin Fields, or you're thinking about trying to get in the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes, or whatever is going to happen with Baker Mayfield, or you're Minnesota or Tampa Bay, and you're looking at your situation, and saying, well, maybe we'll let this guy walk. We can get it. I just think that's such a wild card now into this quarterback market, that it could be one of the more intriguing stories. And I'll tell you where I think it would be the most fun, just because, we can randomly speculate.
Let's do it.
Matter. If he went to the Raiders,
yes,
that would be a blast, right? Play the Broncos twice a year. They need a quarterback. They're not going to draft one in all likelihood where they're at. So go join up with Antonio Pierce, take on Sean Payton and the Broncos twice a year. To me, that's the perfect ending to this.
Could not agree more. I think it's one of the few places he can go in and start week 1. And like I said, Antonio Pierce, I mean, we kind of saw it when he took over and when he played the Colts. Like, his thing, right, is a motivational leader. He's not like an offensive or defensive play caller. He's kind of one of those rah-rah guys that get you fired up, ready to play, a lot like Mike Tomlin. You get a quarterback in the room that has a chip on his shoulder, and like you said, the division now with with revenge on the mind, oh, I am in. I know they moved away from the week 1 doubleheader. Now they do a week 2, that Monday night
Right.
doubleheader. If I could easily see Monday Night Football, Broncos at the Raiders. Let's go. Russell Wilson taking
Yep.
on his old team. Sean Payton coming now into enemy territory. ESPN, there is your welcome. The schedule is already set for week 1.
We already wrote the script. Just follow. We did the script writer's job. It's done. One box he doesn't have to check this year. They can send the check to us in the mail. We'll cover it.
I, though, would agree. Even though he is going to most likely sign for the league minimum, I mean, there's no any more than that is money out that the Broncos save. So there's no incentive for us to take anything more than the league minimum. Even though he's going to get the league minimum, I would agree. I don't think he would come to the Colts. I don't think it would be a good fit. I just don't think George, at this point in his career, he is accepted a backup role.
No.
Like, I think at this point, he's nothing more than an average quarterback. Like, he
Right.
could be like the 15th or 16th best QB in the league, I think, at his ceiling. But I still think in his mind, he thinks he can play. And I don't think he goes Indy. There's no competition. Even though he's decorated 9-time Pro Bowler, won a Super Bowl, there's no competition. I don't think he would sign up for that. And honestly, he's not a bad guy. Like,
No.
he's not a bad dude. But he is like that weird CEO, always worried about his image, always worried about what people are saying about him. I wouldn't want him in the QB room. Even if he was willing to be a backup and willing to be a mentor, George, that's not a guy I want mentoring AR. I don't need AR now putting out these cringy Subway videos about having, I don't know what you would even call it. Like, he had the Danger Witch. I don't know what Subway creative sandwich name they'd have for Anthony Richardson. They get paid more than I do to have that. We don't need a cringy Subway video of Anthony Richardson talking about, you want to live life dangerously, have my new sandwich. No, thank you. We don't need that in Indy, George.
I also, you know, I just feel like it would be inviting the circus back into town. I mean, that is a recipe for disaster in training camp.
That's true.
You try to bring in, I don't think the Colts would have any interest because of that, because they know that they're not trying to bring somebody in to compete with Anthony Richardson. They're bringing somebody in to back him up. I just don't see it happening. But to me, it's incredibly interesting around the rest of the league because all of these teams that are looking for a quarterback, they're not all going to draft one.
Right.
And some of them, even if you're not in the top 3, so if you're not the Bears, the Commanders, or the Patriots, it's got to be on your mind because even if you do draft somebody later, all right, but would they be served by sitting a year or two behind Wilson? It's got to be in their mind. Even if you're the Patriots, you'd have to consider the idea of, what? Maybe we sign Russell Wilson for nothing, draft Marvin Harrison instead of a quarterback, and then come back and get one of the later guys to sit behind him. I mean, it have to be on your mind.
I'm glad we're not talking about this in terms of the Colts needing a QB. So it's nice to kind of talk about other teams for once. But I'm with you. Like, I like Michael Penix Jr. a lot. I like Bo Nix a lot.
Right.
Like, I think you put Bo Nix in the right situation, he could be like, again, Brock Purdy-esque. I know it's maybe unfair, but like, I do think like you put him in a good situation, he could have success. I think you're right in that sense. Like, I don't like Russell Wilson. I think we'll have more than enough suitors because I think that is an attractive idea. If you're, especially the New England, if they have no weapons whatsoever, like that's honestly probably what they should do. Draft Marvin Harrison Jr., bring in Russ as a stopgap for a year or two, draft Penix or Bo Nix in the second round, and build up your offense. I mean, unless you're Andrew Luck, it's very hard to come in with no offensive weapons and no offensive line and have success. The Patriots offense, I mean, they look like that Colts 2011, 2012 group. It is ugly.
It is rough. And I think that's one thing that you want to make sure doesn't happen to Anthony Richardson. That's why
Right.
Michael Pittman's tagged, because if he leaves, it gets kind of rough here. And you want to make sure that that's not the case. And that's why I do think, as we'll start, I'm sure, transitioning here to the draft here, I do think a pass catcher is at the top of their want list. I think we talked about this last week when we were talking about, Ballard saying that he knows what position. I think they want somebody who can make plays with the ball in their hands after the catch, because they don't have it really on the roster right now. Pittman is very good at what he does. Nobody's going to call him a run after the catch guy. It's really not his game. He did have that 75-yard touchdown against the Browns, but
And that screen against the Jaguars week 1, that was like what, a
and
30,
a screen
35-yard
against the
screen?
Jaguars. But I'm not sure the Browns game's canon. Nothing that happened in that game seemed real. Nothing. Like
Except
I,
Myles Garrett just being a one-man wrecking crew. That was all too real. Ask Gardner Minshew about that.
that's why he's defense player of the year. That's why I cannot argue with that at all. That game won him defensive player of the
Alone.
year. Nothing else that happened in that game made any sense whatsoever.
Agreed. I could not agree more. You're right about that. So, okay. Sorry, Pitt. Great moment. But in George's book does not count.
Twilight Zone.
But you are right. And it's like, I mean, that's what Steichen talked about in his presser on Tuesday. Like, they need more yards they need more explosion outside. Like, once you make the catch, make a play. It makes your offense so much easier. We talked even 2 years ago, Matt Ryan, like part of the reason why the Colts literally could not like score a touchdown outside of the 20-yard line was because part of it was they could not make plays after the catch. And I'm with you in the sense that whether that is Brock Bowers, whether that's a receiver at 15, whoever it is, that has to be the priority in the first round is, like you said, getting, and you heard Chris Ballard say it at his press conference, explosive plays, making more explosive plays. And that is yards after the catch. With that said, George, boots on the ground, you were there at the combine in Indy. And especially in that vein, any prospect jump out to you in terms of testing better, running faster, just being like, oh wow, like this is, this has Colts written all over it, and he fits the need of offense and can bring that explosion they're looking for.
I mean, obviously, everyone's gonna say Brian Thomas Jr., right? Because absolute freak. But I knew about him coming in. Like he was already on my radar coming in. I think the one that kind of caught me a little bit off guard, not because you didn't see it coming, just because I probably didn't connect him as much with the Colts before this, is Xavier Worthy from Texas. There were people saying going in he might break the combine record, and he did. And I think there's something to be said for that because that's a lot of pressure. How many times every year I feel like there's somebody we say this guy might break the combine record. To go in and actually do it with that kind of expectation on you says something about the competitor you are, I think. But the size element, the weight in particular here, we're talking about Bryce Young all over again. The weight element here was something that I wasn't sure would that match up with the Colts. But walking away from the combine, I felt like I don't think he's at the top of their board by any stretch of imagination. But I thought, if there's a trade back situation, maybe he comes into play. I know he doesn't fit that perfect Ballard mold, but neither did Josh Downs. And that worked out
True.
pretty well. And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with Ballard working towards Shane Steichen and what he wants. And I just look at, the kid from Alabama's name is escaping me right now. Devontae Smith?
Yes. Yep.
In Philly. And I
The
think
Slim Reaper.
you could see some comparisons there. You could see where a guy who had Smith in Philly might say, I'll take a chance on Xavier Worthy. It became a possibility on a guy that I sort of had written off coming in. Now I'm thinking, I don't think at 15. I think that's probably too rich. But look, if they trade back, I wonder if that comes into play. The other guy is not a pass catcher, Nate Wiggins, who just absolutely lit it up, is huge. He does fit all the Ballard. I feel like he and Brian Thomas Jr., I'm not sure Ballard didn't create them in a lab.
He does check every box. Now, okay. So Nate Wiggins got hurt,
Yeah.
didn't finish the testing.
It's still, how that goes. It's still a little bit fuzzy, but it did sound like he might even be okay to go by his pro day. So we'll see. It sounded like it was a minor injury. Every injury doesn't happen to you is a minor injury though. So
that's true. I'm glad you brought up Worthy. He's fascinating because in one sense, you're right. I think like that's a good point you bring up. He's not like, I don't think he's realistic at 15. But you're right. If there's like 3 or 4 guys that Ballard likes and he trades down to 20 or whatever, I think we can then assume, okay, Brock Bowers is probably gone. and probably Brian Thomas Jr. is also probably gone. So the Colts trade down, unless it's like to 16 or 17. The odds of those two guys being there for the Colts are obviously a lot slimmer. And Worthy's an interesting guy because I remember him as a freshman at Texas. Burst on the scene, was their only real weapon they had on that team. He was uncoverable. He was so good. And now obviously you see the speed. Shane Steichen is absolutely on the short list of coaches you would trust to get the most out of him. Like, I hate to say this comp because it's completely flopped in the NFL and not surprising in a way. Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney, it's a different, like, I think Xavier Worthy's a more polished receiver than Toney, who's just more of a gadget guy who's really fast, and Florida found different ways to get him the ball. But he was not as polished of a route runner, understanding defenses. Like, he was just more freak athlete, just getting the ball in space and just go at it. But it's like when he was drafted by the Giants and Jason Garrett was their OC, it's like, Jason Garrett's the most vanilla guy you could possibly have. There's no way he's going to know what to do with this guy. Did not work out. Now, clearly, Tony's an idiot. Let's just say that for fast forward. That's part of the reason why it didn't work out in Kansas City. I don't get those same vibes from Worthy, and I think he's a more polished receiver. But it's like you look at Steichen, who's a mad scientist, who I think you talk about just like a fun fit in this offense, who would be able to put him in multiple positions on the field and get the most out of him. That's I'm glad you brought him up, because obviously he flashed just by breaking the combine record of running a 4.2 140 fastest ever. But it's also, he's not just a speed guy. Like, he does have hands. He is a good route runner. He could take the top off the defense. He could take an end around 60 yards as well. Like, he is a way more polished Kadarius Toney, that Steichen is one of, let's say, 6 or 7 offensive coaches I think you could trust to get the most out of him. I like that. I like that call a lot from you.
Yeah, I just felt like it's a guy that wasn't on my board because of all those things. You know, when we start looking at Colts receivers, are they big, right? First of all, are they tall? Do they have some size to them? And then the speed element we knew was there. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, hey, if they do go off 15, because you can never, ever rule that out, then I think he comes in play. At 15, I think Bowers, and I think
BTJ.
Brian Thomas Jr. And then the other one is I think one of the guys that caught your eye. I'm pretty sure a pass rusher in this draft.
Dallas Turner. He was absolutely one where ran a 4.46 40, which is unbelievable at his size. You know, the broad jump. Like, I'll say this before I go to what I'm about to say. I do try to take the testing like with a grain of salt at most. Like, a lot of these guys now, the way they train, they do pop. It's easy to kind of look good in this testing. And it's like, what do you really do on the football field versus how fast can you run in a straight line without pads on from a down position that's never going to happen in an actual game? How much does it actually translate? But this is a guy that was a testing freak. And he does give off to me like sort of Micah Parsons vibes, where you can move him around. He is a good pass rusher. Excuse me. Holy cow, see, I'm getting choked up. I'm excited. He's a good pass rusher. He also can play coverage as well. Like, he kind of is like one of those jack of all trades sort of guy. You can move him around the defense, where if you are 15 and let's say Brian Thomas Jr. goes earlier than we think and Brock Bowers off the board, and there's really not an offensive guy, Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, like, we got to have right now. That's a guy at 15 where it does feel like if you want to go defensive side of the ball, he can really check 2 boxes, be a good edge pass rusher, just an athletic freak, and kind of see with the Cowboys moving Micah Parsons all over the field. They put him at linebacker, they put him at D end, they put him up the middle at times as well. Like, he plays, 4 or 5 different positions. It felt like to me watching Dallas Turner test at the combine and even just watching him at Alabama the last few years, he can kind of fit that role as well and just be one of those like jack of all trades defensive guys that could be a game wrecker for defenses in a way. Kind of, we're talking about Xavier Worthy on the other end. We kind of move him around and do different things. That to me felt like we can get with Dallas Turner on the defensive side of the ball.
100% first team All-American. Had to replace the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year at Alabama and did a really good job doing it.
Good
he
point.
Had 10 sacks. I think he was 7th in the league and played opposite of Anderson the year before that. So, you got to see a little bit of both of that from how he works off another guy and then how he has to be the guy. And he was able to do a good job in both. What I thought was interesting, I didn't find out about him until the combine. He was a basketball star. I mean, we're not just talking about a guy who played basketball. We're talking about a guy who got recruited or got invited to a mini camp for USA basketball as a younger guy. So,
Wow.
not like pre-high school, I think. But like top level. Played AAU basketball with Scotty Barnes of the Raptors. Like that, I think speaks to that athleticism that you're talking about, and it also helps me believe that it's not just workout athleticism, that there's something, functional there. And yeah, to me, he's a real interesting guy. The Parsons comp, Mel Kiper made it last year before he was in the draft and said, this is a guy that they're going to talk about in that vein. It'd be interesting to me to see. Look, Dan Quinn is the one that made Parsons, right? I mean, he's
Yep.
the one that did that. Where's Dan Quinn's background? Where did his defensive philosophy start in the NFL? Seattle. Who did he replace there? Gus Bradley. Like I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. It's not a position the Colts have used. They don't have anybody like Parsons. They haven't even tried anything like that.
Right.
I don't know that there might be one team in the NFL that has anybody like Parsons right now. And that's a big bar to put on Dallas Turner. But if you squint, you can see it. And that to me might be tough for Chris Ballard to pass up if Turner's there at 15. Again, like with Bowers, I don't know that he will be. I think there's a good chance that somebody above them is going to make that move. But if he falls to 15, I think Dallas Turner, those right now, those would be my three most likely guys. Brock Bowers, Dallas Turner, Brian Thomas Jr., probably in that order.
And all three check the box, like Chris Ballard talked about, explosive players in different ways. And obviously, one on a different side of the ball in Turner. But all three, you could say, hey, are you an explosive playmaker? Check. All three check it. And I think, too, that's like the right approach the Colts should be taking at 15. You'll put yourself in one box of, hey, we need a receiver here. You take explosion. And like you said, too, like, you could talk about, I think it was Chris Ballard who didn't really get, I think it was him. I listened to a lot of press conferences last week. I'm pretty sure he didn't really agree with the notion of positionless,
Yes,
the idea of positionless players. But in the case of Bowers, in the case of Turner, you can, let's say this, if you don't believe in the positionless term, which I do, then they play multiple positions. How about that? You could put them in different spots and have them succeed at a high level and ask them to do different things. Brian Thomas Jr. just put a bow on it. I mean, you talk about big time deep playmaker. Him running under AR deep balls, George, I think that we have that for the next decade. Oh my goodness gracious. That would be a lot of fun. It could reminisce, Luck TY, just with that, especially that deep ball connection, see him running under it. That feel like you said before, that feels like a match made in heaven, especially when it comes to the measurables that Ballard wants from that position and how it fits perfectly to what Ballard looks for.
Yeah, I mean, Ballard just draw him up on a light board. I mean, it's really scary when you see those testing numbers and his size. I was like, that's a Chris Ballard dream come true. He could not have created on Madden. That's the guy he makes. When he sits down with create a player, it's Brian Thomas Jr. It's insane. But I do think I think my main takeaway from the combine was they've got a lot of options at 15 because there's those three guys we just talked about. Nate Wiggins, I think, could be in play there. It wouldn't be something that's totally out of the realm of possibility. Terrion Arnold, if he would slip, the top corner on most people's boards in this draft. Even Quinion Mitchell could possibly be in play there. I mean, there's six guys, three of them corners, and that's the tip of the iceberg. I think there's probably 10 to 12 guys that they could take there that you would, okay, that makes sense. I can see that happening, which also may point to a trade down, but we'll see. We'll see how everything works out. But I think I came away from the combine thinking they can definitely get an explosive player, which is their stated goal with that 15th pick.
And not a bad place to be, George. Having options And like I said, even if you feel they need to trade down, and you still feel like you can get one of those 6 or 7 guys that is going to add explosive playmaking to the team on whatever side of the ball, great problem. And you get a draft pick or 2 on top of it, great problem. Great problem to have as well. Speaking of, I'm glad you brought up corners here and where the Colts could go, because the last thing I want to touch on, George, it's rumor season, right? Of course, now coming out of the combine, everyone's talking, everyone's gossiping. And one rumor now, one report coming out that impacts the Colts is about Chiefs DB L'Jarius Sneed. Now, USA Today is reporting on Tuesday night that the Chiefs are looking to, they did tag L'Jarius Sneed. They are, though, open to trading him. The Colts right now are one of 7 teams listed that are reportedly interested in trading for Sneed. Now, first and foremost, it's a shock just honestly hear the Colts linked with anyone when it comes to trades or free agency. You never see their name linked in terms of making any deals or any splash moves, because outside of really DeForest Buckner, that's not been Ballard's style to make a big time move here. We talked about before in the free agency pod, George, kind of like the free agency preview, with the state of the Colts DB position being very, very, very inexperienced. I think for me, it makes more sense to, like, if you're going to make a splash move, to me, that's the exact guy you go after. L'Jarius Sneed on the Chiefs, according to at least Ari Myrov, one reporter. It takes a second-round pick to get him, so you could keep your pick at 15. You can use your second-round pick, essentially, to get L'Jarius Sneed. Now, you're going to have to pay him, but obviously the Colts, we know, have ample space to do that. I'm in, George. I think this is a move the Colts should make. I think this makes perfect sense for their situation and their cap space. What do you think? I think it absolutely should go down. I would do it if I'm Chris Ballard. What is your view on maybe making let's say a second round pick and then paying the Chiefs right now 2-time reigning Super Bowl defensive back L'Jarius Sneed?
Yeah, first of all, if they do that deal, then a trade down becomes a lot more likely again too. Pick up some of those picks back and recoup the compensation there. I am definitely on the team of go and get a veteran corner. Look, Ballard said that he's not afraid to draft another one, but I don't know if you want your quarterback room to be kindergarten. You're
Right.
going to have so many youngsters in that group if you draft another. Now, granted, if that's the best player, they'll do it. I don't think there's any question. I don't think he's going to sit there and say Nate Wiggins is the top guy on my board and there is a gap to the next guy, but I'm going to ignore that and take the next guy because we're young at corner. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think ideally you would add a veteran corner to that mix. I think Sneed fits the bill in a lot of ways. I mean, he was ultra productive. He's also in Kansas City, which means that Ballard's got plenty of info on him. We know he has tons of contacts over there. He's going to know everything he needs to know about him and feel they trust it. You can get info from other teams and not know whether or not you can rely on it. He's going to have guys over there, Andy Reid, Brett Veach, that he's worked with, that he trusts, that will tell him the truth. So I think that makes it more likely because he's going to feel. I think one of the things about the Buckner deal that made it happen is his respect for John Lynch, Ballard's, and feeling like, okay, he's shooting me straight here, and I can deal with this guy on a even basis. So I think that would be something in Kansas City that could be done. I do kind of, I don't know, I'm always leery this time of year because I feel like we've entered lying season. You know what I mean? We've entered that period where agents in particular want to get certain things out there so that they can get a market for their guys. And I just felt like every single team on that list felt like the team that you would pinpoint for a corner. Like if somebody just sat down and who needs a corner. All right, these guys are all interested.
Let me ask you this then, because of that, right? So basically a quarter of the league, right? It has been listed. It's the Patriots, Jaguars, Lions, Vikings, Titans, Falcons, Colts. 7 teams USA Today does list as interested in Sneed. Do you buy the Colts are interested? Like, do you even buy that? Or do you think that's more, like you said, agents kind of looking at teams who need corners and kind of maybe picking that versus actual tangible hey, there's real, we know Chris Ballard likes this player and would talk to him. Like, which do you think it is there?
Right.
Is it more agents push or team push?
Right. I mean, I buy they're interested. It's that level, like you were talking about, that comes into play because I think a lot of times with the team, in this situation, it's true from the standpoint of the Colts like Sneed, but it might not be true from the standpoint of the Colts are willing to give up what the Chiefs want, and that's the big question. I'm with you. I think it's a move they should definitely be interested in making. I think it's one that uh, if that got reported, next week, uh, it's one that I think we would both praise. I think it's something that would really help this football team. And I think they're in a position, as we just talked about at 15, that they can trade back if they feel like they need to recoup draft picks because of this deal. But also, I think they're in a position that they could just give up that second round pick and take somebody in the third round and feel like, okay, one of three guys we were talking about at 15, and then Sneed, and then a third round pick I feel like that would be a very good first 2 days of the draft for them. So I think it's something they should be interested in. It's just hard to know, in part because I get the sense they may be a little bit more interested in the safety market, just because of things that have been said by Chris Ballard, uh, you know, calling out that free safety position in particular, noting that they were young and not really throwing Rodney Thomas and Nick Cross under the bus, but saying they need more consistency there. And that's another group that's extremely young. Even if you bring back Julian Blackman, you've got a young group back there. And just looking at some of those releases that are starting to come in, because obviously it's that time of year too, unfortunately, where a lot of guys are hitting the market. Um, I feel like it's a deep safety group, and I think they may be, and it's total guesswork. I'm going to put that out there right now. I'm not reporting anything on sources here. This is total guesswork. Just listening to Chris Ballard and what he said and looking at that market, I think they may be leaning more toward signing a free safety.
So if they go veteran route in the defensive back room, you think it'd be more safety than corner?
Could be both, honestly. But again, if it's both, I don't think Sneed would be one of them because it would be such a big piece of that pie. Um, it could be both, but I feel like, just my gut feeling is that they're prioritizing safety.
I hope at least it's needed. I hope that if Ballard again is going to go vet, I hope it is kind of making this move. Like you look at some of these stats, George, it's unbelievable. L'Jarius Sneed last year, according to PFF, when he was the closest defender on any pass in his area, did not allow a touchdown. Only player in the league to not allow a touchdown as a closest defender when facing at least 80 targets in 2023. He allowed, as a closest defender, just a 48.2 completion percentage, lowest of any player with at least 80 targets. Guy's 27 years old. He's 6'1". Like, he Super Bowl champion, 2-time Super Bowl champion. Like you said, played in Kansas City, a team obviously Chris Ballard knows very well. Like, it just feels like he checks every single box, where I feel like you would get more value, even though you're giving up more and giving a bigger contract to a guy like L'Jarius Sneed versus on the safety market. I'm sure you can get one for a relatively good deal. And obviously, being free agents, you don't have to give up any draft capital. I think paying more and giving up more in terms of draft capital for a guy like Sneed and his history, where he comes from, and his veteran experience at that position, especially at DB, I think would be, to me, the wiser investment if you're Chris Ballard.
I'm with you.
This feels, again, the Lions are a team that should be aggressive as well. Like, I would agree, there are teams like the Patriots make no sense in this scenario to be trading for L'Jarius Sneed. I would argue the Titans as well make no sense for where they are right now. Falcons, maybe. I mean, I think they're more focused right now on quarterback, especially if they do, let's say, follow through on Kirk Cousins. I would say that a good amount of salary will be taken up on Kirk's end. So I'm not sure if you want to trade and pay Sneed, what, 25, whatever it is, $1 million a year he's looking for. I'm not sure if that's the way the Falcons want to go. So I would definitely agree. Some of those teams, it's like, doesn't, like, sure, they need DBs, but for where they are right now, what they're trying to do, I'm not sure that makes the most sense. This, I think, makes a lot of sense for the Colts on paper. And if you're Chris Ballard, who is very calculated, as we know, with his free agent moves and being very prudent for the most part, this to me feels like an opportunity, especially when You have a quarterback on a rookie deal. Hopefully can get an explosive playmaker as well at pick 15. This does feel like the time to pounce.
I'm with you, 100% on this one, because I feel like, uh, I just feel like I think one of the biggest criticisms that I think is fair about Chris Ballard that you hear a lot is that they don't go after game changers, that they settle in the middle of the market, or they settle for, bargains, and they don't go
Right.
get the guy that could actually change the game. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. And the one time they did it was the Forrest Buckner, and he's definitely. I don't think you regret anything about that move if you're Chris Ballard. So if you want to replicate that and do it in the defensive secondary, I think Sneed is a perfect way to do it, and I think it would send a message to the locker room too. Is one reason I like this. Of, okay, we're going for this. You know, we're gonna
Good
we're
point.
gonna make a move here. We understand the AFC is jacked. We understand the division is full, and that's one thing Chris Ballard said. I can't remember where he was. It was some media. It wasn't with the combine. It was at the combine, but it wasn't his combine presser. It was, an interview with somebody, and he talked about uh the quarterbacks in the AFC South, the way that the league has all of a sudden that division has jumped way up. You've got obviously CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence, and the Titans are feeling really good right now about Will Levis, and he was talking about you've got to respond to that. You've got to be ready, to defend that. So to me, Sneed is a perfect response to all of that, to what you feel like is happening in the division, and the message it sends to the locker room of the time is now. Okay, last year we were close. We're going to make a run at it, and to prove it to you, we're going out and getting L'Jarius Sneed.
That's a great point too, because you are right. Like the moves the Colts regret are the ones where they sort of went all in, but also went all in on kind of like guys that are just like redemption projects. Carson Wentz was you were getting, trying to buy low and, turn around his career when there was questions. Matt Ryan, same thing. He was in the last leg of his, last leg of his career in Atlanta. You bring him in and you hope to revitalize his career. Like they have not, outside of Buckner, they have not gotten someone at the height of their game that is like, okay, just keep on doing what you're doing. Not like, oh, you showed flashes a few years ago. We're going to try to get that back. It's no. You are playing at a high level right now. We're going to bring you in just to ask you to do that. Buckner is playing at a high level, and I would say he exceeded the level he's playing at in San Francisco, the way he's played here in Indy. No regrets there. So, I mean, it's been few and far in between, but when Ballard's done it, it's worked out. And the times you regret it are the ones where you kind of, like you said, middle it, you kind of hedge your bet a little bit, but you're going for more redemption and hoping to get a bargain versus paying premium for a good player. And I'm with you. Like free agency, I think it is overrated because Chris Ballard said at the combine, like the A players never make it to free agency 99% of the time. And then so the B players get pushed up to A because teams need to sign guys, and now you overvalue and overrate guys as well. I'm with Ballard there most of the time when it comes to free agency. I do think it's, when you look at the teams that spend the most money, more times than not, they don't make the playoffs and don't have a lot of success. The ones that make the big splashes and the ones that quote unquote win the off season rarely actually win on the field. So I agree with his sentiment of, we're not going to, you could get finishing pieces in free agency, but you're not going to build your team or try to land big guys in free agency because a lot of guys don't land there. L'Jarius Sneed is an example of, he's not in free agency, right? He's under contract, but you trade him, and especially if it's a second round pick as well, I'd rather use a second round pick on a proven guy that has been a championship culture that, too, George, can just, even if he's not the best corner like in the league next year, but just can bring that championship experience of how to do things, instill wisdom offensively and defensively. This is a guy that went against Patrick Mahomes every day in practice. I'm sure he's learned some lessons that could help. He could apply to Anthony Richardson. So it's like with a young, impressionable team, you bring someone like that in who's now climbed the mountaintop 2 times in a row, knows what a championship organization looks like, what a championship practice looks like, what championship habits are. That right there alone could be worth the money in the draft pick, let alone then the play you think you could get from a guy who hopefully could shut down half the field. And then now, make it easier on Juju Brents to give him an easier assignment, make it easier on Jalen Jones as well, and just make your overall secondary defense better by having one of those standouts there. You said just a playmaker, a game changer at an important position. And also, like you mentioned as well, in a division that if Will Levis pans out the way the Titans think, we could be talking about the best quarterback division 2 or 3 years from now. You want guys that are going to be here for the long haul that also could slow that down.
Absolutely. I mean, and Sneed was part of the second best defense in the NFL, second ranked defense in the NFL. And the thing of it is, you look back at that Chiefs run, they won because of their defense.
100%.
Yeah, they have the big name quarterback, and obviously Patrick Mahomes made plays when he had to, but their defense was probably more responsible for them winning the Super Bowl this year than the offense, which has never happened before with the Chiefs. Sneed's a big part of that. And you bring him in, like you said, mentor not just the guys in that room, but what did he learn from Patrick Mahomes that he could share with Anthony Richardson as far as work ethic, as far as things he does to manipulate a defense. Sneed will know that as well as anybody in the league because he saw it, every day in training camp and every day in practice. There's a lot of value beyond just the surface value in making a move like this. We'll see. It's an un-Chris Ballard-like move in the sense that he hasn't done it a lot, but it's not an un-Chris Ballard-like move in the sense that I think there's a lot of comparisons here to the Buckner move, where you go out and you get a guy at a position of need that there isn't any projection on. You're not, like you said, it's not a redemption thing. You're not trying to bank on, well, he's got to get back from this injury, he's got to fix this. You know what you're getting. And if you can go out there and get that done, my question in the most simplest terms is, are you going to get somebody in the second round better than that?
And with draft picks, the way they hit, right? The odds are no. And so I'm with you. I'd rather have the known commodity versus, like you said, another risk of second round pick at whatever position it is, versus getting a guy that's already proven it on a championship team as well. I'm with you. I think it makes a ton of sense for the Colts. Now we wait, George. Now we wait. Free agency starts next week. We'll start to have some answers on what this team's going to look like as well, with obviously all the free agents the Colts have themselves, how many resign, how many get deals that are just too good to match. I don't expect a lot of frenziness, again, outside of the Colts trying to keep their own, George, but maybe this is the offseason. Chris Ballard has something up his sleeve.
We'll see. I still think that there's a good chance to move something at safety. Like I said, I think you're going to see a move there. Maybe a Sneed splash happens. If it does, that'll be big news. There'll be an emergency pod. And so subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you will know it's coming when that happens. But aside from that, yeah, I think a lot of it is, look, Pittman in a long-term deal is still a thing. It's not done. We're sort of at halftime right now of that saga. And then you've got, Grover Stewart, Kenny Moore, Julian Blackmon, Rigo Sanchez. There are other deals that need to get done. And now we're getting into that time where any of them could happen between now and the start of free agency. Obviously, next Monday is the start of the legal tampering period. I love that. My favorite term in the NFL, legal tampering.
The oxymoron.
It's absolutely such an NFL thing to do too. Just call it what it is. It's the making buzz period. We're going to make sure that we're still in the headlines at a time when college basketball is dominating the sports world. But I think that's where you're probably going to start to hear a lot of this. Normally those 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, where you start to hear deals being reached, trades, although the Buckner trade somehow didn't break until like right before the start of the league year that year. Those are the kind of, I do think it's going to be a very newsworthy start of next week. Around the league, whether here or not, around the league for sure.
That's true. Well, I think even in Indy, like I said, with all the free agents the Colts have, even if it's re-signing their own, it will be a way busier free agent period in the middle of March than it's ever been under Chris Ballard.
Very true.
That is for sure, which is why, like Georgia said, subscribe on YouTube. Download and subscribe wherever you do get your podcasts. We will be back Well, we'll be back next Wednesday for sure. But between now and then, L'Jarius Sneed, another big time move. We will be ready. We are prepped and ready for an emergency pod if the Colts do dictate.
Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson, let's get nuts. Let's get crazy. Let's just load up every quarterback possible, George, and eventually want us to hit.
Hey, all I know is there are Pro Bowlers everywhere on the market this year. People not upset with not having a quarterback. You got your pick of Pro Bowlers this offseason.
You are right about that. You are 100% right about that. You want a Pro Bowl quarterback, it's a good time to be in need. Maybe the Colts could use a Pro Bowl backup. Just had one in Gardner Minshew.
Replace one.
Gotta replace. If they're trying to get better, you can't lose a Pro Bowl quarterback and not bring one back in.
Absolutely.
What message are you sending to the team?
Not a good one. That's not a message you want to send to your locker room.
Oh, the silliness has begun. Busy Colts off season is really going to ramp up now. Subscribe, download wherever you do get your pods. We are going to be here breaking it all down with you. We'll talk to you next Wednesday or right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.